Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, wine lovers of all ages, at least if you're of legal drinking age. Today, with Johnny Say Something, we are going to talk about our good friend Nebbiolo once again. Yes, Nebbiolo reigns supreme in the Piemonte, but instead of talking about Barolo, we are talking about Barbaresco. And with our good friends Cascina Bruciata, we are going to get a great idea of the regalness of this grape and why these wines are so well known. Stay tuned for another episode of Johnny Say Something. All right, so once again, we are talking about Barbaresco. As a name of a wine, it falls into a similar category of that of Barolo. Barbaresco is a name of an actual place. It's a name of a township here in the Piemonte, but the area in which Barbaresco wines can be made is just a little bit larger. We're talking about 4 different townships with Barbaresco instead of the 11 when we were talking about Barolo. The area in which you can make Barbaresco wine is much, much smaller. We're talking not even 2,000 acres of land in total, which relative to Barolo really is a limited amount. Now, there's a lot of other things that go into making this wine and why it is slightly different than its brother, let's say, Barolo. And some of those are nuances, and nuances that once again get transformed in the grape of Nebbiolo. Nebbiolo has this beautiful ability to be transferred, to transmit something unique from the area in which it comes. So unique that Nebbiolo really can't be used anywhere else, or there hasn't been very successful experimentations with it. Here in the Piemonte, it has found a unique place. And again, in Barbaresco, in these 4 different townships, it's brought out a character that seems to be a little bit elegant, a little bit more elegant, let's say, than that of a Barolo. We'll talk about some of the reasons why, but you'll find that the reasons are complex. Complex, just a little bit like the history of Cascina Bruciata. Cascina in Italian means farmhouse. Bruciata unfortunately means burnt. Put 2 and 2 together and you start to realize the story behind the name of this piece of land and the land, the cellar that has long been on top of it. See, this area and the land that is around it is a part of a cru. The cru is called Rio Sordo. And just like Barolo, there's a number of menzioni geografiche aggiunte, but once again, less. In Barolo, there were over 100, close to 200. Here, we're only talking about 66. So again, a smaller number, but that doesn't take anything away from the beauty and the elegance of these wines. Getting back to the history and the story of these wines and Rio Sordo specifically. Since the early 1800s, in books, in writings, there has been historical documentation that the vines that produce grapes on this piece of land are absolutely phenomenal. They were always regarded as some of the best. And this was for wine merchants as well, people who were buying and selling grapes for other people to eventually produce wines. Because it's important to remember, way back when, it was really difficult, and it still is, to have your own cellar. There's a lot of machinery, there's a lot of tools, and there's a lot of aspects that you have to be able to make a wine consistently well. And so in the past, people were selling a lot of their grapes, and these were always recognized as some of the best. The original family who owned this piece of land was the Balbos. And unfortunately, in the mid-1800s, possibly because they were making such good wine, there seemed to be a little bit of envy in the air that's, let's say, sparked something unfortunate. And that is where it gets its name, but it goes on with this tradition of producing incredible grapes. And that continues to the 2000s, and in 2016, there is a passage of ownership that went from the Balbo family to the Abona family. The Abona family, we've talked about them, and we've talked about the other work that they've done in the townships of Barolo, and especially with Marchesi di Barolo. This is an incredibly well-known family, and not just well-known, but well-versed in winemaking. The Abona family is bringing with them an immense amount of knowledge and know-how when it comes to treating and working with the grape of Nebbiolo. So after they took over in 2016, they began producing the wines and labeling them Cascina Bruciata, the same exact label that was there before. And I really like how they've allowed for the folklore, let's say, of Cascina Bruciata to continue on. They haven't tried to interrupt it. They haven't tried to relabel it. Cascina Bruciata is a cornerstone in Barbaresco, and it should remain that way. All right, let's get back to the wine real quick and talk about Barbaresco's history to get where we are today. In 1864, this was one of the first years that there became a notable mention of Barbaresco wine. So it's a little bit behind Barolo, but at the same time, it still has a great tradition. Now, it had two major roadblocks along the way getting to where we are, and those were being World War II, quite an obvious one, and phylloxera, which was a disease that basically ravaged the Piemonte, Langhe, the entire country winemaking area and countryside by basically destroying the plants and making it so that the owners and the winemakers had to rip out their vines. This created great difficulty, really from an economic point of view, and that return was a little bit slow. We get to the mid 1900s, so about 1950, 1955, we get an upsurge in Barbaresco thanks to one very, very well-known family who definitely, I don't want to say championed the area, but became kind of the flag holders, the flag bearers of the area, and rightfully so. And that kind of takes us into a time where kind of wine geeks, wine lovers, the wine consumer kind of became more and more interested and wanted to understand more about these wines. So let's talk about that a little bit, because again, we're talking about a wine that is made from the same grape as another great Italian wine that are actually quite close to each other. But oftentimes we use different adjectives to describe them. In some way, that's right. In some ways, maybe a little bit less. But the truth of it is, these wines are different. They have different characteristics. Some of its features may be, we can say a little plus or a little minus relative to the other. When we're talking about tannins, acidity, mouthfeel, and maybe even an alcohol in the wine. So, because we should always remember that Nebbiolo has this incredible ability to be a transmitter, a translator of terroir. It's able to take everything that's going on, both underneath, let's say what we can see underneath the land, underneath the earth, and also all of the other elements that happen around it. And when we talk about Barbaresco, there are a number of things that are happening that definitely go on to affect this wine. The first one being is the actual soil. Here we're talking about a different soil than what is typically known and understood in Barolo. Here, most importantly, the soils are a little bit younger, and the fact that they are younger automatically makes them a little bit softer, and that softness definitely translates into the wine. A lot of that has to do with the percentage and the amount of sand that goes into the overall soil composition. The other part is always clay and lime and different percentages of that. And we know that to be true even in Barolo. But here, these sands really offer something that is extremely elegant. Altitude, once again, has always been a fundamental aspect when it comes to vines, winemaking, and especially when we talk about Nebbiolo. Nebbiolo is a bit finicky. It only likes particular things, and one of the things that it does enjoy is it enjoys heat. And we're starting to maybe we can pick up on that because, hey, Barbaresco and the grapes for Barbaresco typically are harvested earlier than that of Barolo. So once again, this would lend us to thinking that the temperatures in the area are going to be warmer. Also because the altitude is a little bit lower. In Barolo and in all of those 11 townships, we do have some higher altitudes. Here, the maximum that we're going to get when we start talking about Barbaresco, and these Barbarescos specifically, is 300 meters above sea level. So that's not too high, and we're not going to get a lot of that airflow maybe from the higher altitudes. But we do have one other aspect that maybe Barolo really doesn't have, and that is the river Tanaro. And that is the river Tanaro. See, directly, if you went straight west from where Cascina Bruciata is, you would come in contact with this river. A river that is not only just beautiful to see and mesmerizing in its own right, it does an immense amount for the microclimate and the actual terroir surrounding the area. This is an air conditioning, a cooling factor unlike any other that really puts its stamp on Barbaresco. So it's this, once again, this coming together of multiple elements. It can be warmer temperatures. We are in a more low-lying area, but at the same time, we have a mitigating factor, which is the river. So think of all of these things when we talk about the evolution that happens inside of a grape, the grape skin itself. We're getting that heat which we want, but we're also getting cooled at the same time. So this combination is going to go and put an incredible effect on these grapes. And I'll jump on this whole river theme here for a second. If we check out the name on this Barbaresco here, the cru is Rio Sordo, which translates to a deaf river. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that underneath the land of Cascina Bruciata and this incredible ridge that it sits on is an underwater river. There is a water table with a lot of water, and this is obviously going to be a great benefit as the vines go into stress, as they dig deeper down into the land, looking for nutrients and looking for water. So we're pushing our vines. We always want to, because that's what sometimes gives us that character, but at the same time we want them to be healthy and we want them to be well and happy, and they need a little bit of water from time to time. And this Rio Sordo underneath will definitely give that to them. So what do you say? Let's start off with a little bit of tasting. Today we are going to jump into the Nebbiolo, which we absolutely love. And there's something interesting about this, which is it only goes through steel tanks. So there's no wood used with this wine whatsoever. And then we have the two Barbarescos, and one being a Riserva. One note that we should definitely say is the difference in winemaking, specifically with that of Barolo. Barbaresco only goes or needs for the DOCG to have 2 years of aging, while the Riserva must have 4. First, I just have to start off with this wine because it is hands down one of my favorites that we've tasted recently. It really shows off all of the beauty that can be Nebbiolo. It has a beautiful amount of tannins to it. And at the same time, it has absolutely gorgeous fruit notes that really captivate and make it so incredibly enjoyable. All right. I have to say, thanks to our good friend Corvin, I'm not too used to pouring bottles anymore. So sometimes, hey, it takes a little bit more time than necessary, but that is just fine. And once again, as I'm sure you guys are seeing now, the images of this absolutely breathtaking area, we should note that this winery is actually quite small. We're only talking about 6 hectare-acres of vineyards. And that really is not too much land. And everything is in a very, very compact space. So as we move around this ridge, this first part, this larger part, is what goes into this Langhe Nebbiolo. And one of the things that I love about this wine, as I said before, it only goes through steel, but these vines also are 30 years old. So they're at a point where they're coming into some of their own complexity, and because of that, it really shows its identity. And again, I just love it. Just do a little taste. Obviously, we have this beautiful, beautiful kind of pale garnet color, which is oh so typical of our good friend Nebbiolo. And beautiful fresh fruit. We're talking about red fruit. We have that cherry note. And at the same time, the acidity is very pronounced already from the glass. And that is what gives you this incredible freshness. This wine isn't supposed to be left to age for an extremely long period of time. This is a wine to be enjoyed young. This is a great wine for dinner with friends, for eating multiple things. You don't have to create a whole menu around it. This right here is just, I don't want to say it's an everyday wine because I think some people take that as demeaning. This is a beautiful wine that I would be privileged to drink every day of the week. Beautiful tannins. Again, when we talk about the tannins being a little bit less in this area compared to those of Barolo, a lot of the times we're not talking about one simple reason why. Even though wine is science, we don't know all of the science into grape growing. And so it's not just that, oh, this soil has a little bit more of that, and then that's why. It's a combination. It's a combination of the temperature. It's a combination of the microclimate, of the soil, of the age of the vines, of the winemaking process. All of these things really, really get into the overall structure of this wine. Tannins, once again, really, really present, but friendly, not aggressive at all. And this, served at the right temperature. And again, guys, the right temperature is key for red wines, especially for the summer, because you can enjoy them when they're at the right temperature. The moment that red wines get a little bit too warm, they, at least for me personally, they begin to bother a little bit. They become a little bit less enjoyable. But this right here, once again, an absolutely beautiful wine. And these guys do work in Biologico. They are certified Biologico, so that means that they are taking extra attention into what goes on in the vineyard, how they are treating it, and what they are doing to really enhance its own ecosystem with everything that goes on around it, whether it be other plants that are able to give it nutrients that protect it from certain types of diseases, or invite bugs and other insects that actually help protect the grapes. There's so much that goes on around a vineyard, and working in Biologico is one of those things that really helps enhance that. So another reason why these wines give you an authenticity that I find extremely, extremely intriguing. All right, game's over. It's time to move on to the big boys. And for that, I need another glass. Voila. These glasses, first and foremost, are from our good friends at Italesse. Incredible instruments and tools that really help enhance your overall wine experience. We're gonna get into these two wines right now. And again, I'm very, very excited to be able to taste these with you guys. And just a reminder, guys, this one right here is a Barbaresco, not the Riserva, 2016, while this one is the Riserva, 2015. Now, they both hold on to this cru of Rio Sordo because they both lie basically in the same area. There is going to be some differences though, mainly into the age of vineyards. They don't tell us exactly the age of the vineyards for the non-Riserva, which makes me think they may have been replanted a little bit more recently, and that could be one of the reasons why. This one right here, the Riserva though, this is over 60-year-old vineyards. That is absolutely going to give it some incredible complexity, and I'm very, very looking forward to tasting that with you guys. All right, we are going to go for the non-Riserva first. Again, 2016, and this right here. Again, thanks to Cordovan for allowing us to have tastings like this, where then this bottle can go back to its rightful home in my cellar and rest, hopefully for a couple more years. I don't make any promises though, because you never know what's gonna happen. Could be a wild Saturday night, friend comes over and you want to drink a Barbaresco, and hey, that's the right moment to do it. Remember guys, these wines are made to be drank, they're made to be enjoyed. Yes, they do some fantastic things when you let them age, but I can promise you that the emotions and the excitement and the fun that you have when you share these wines with your friends is the reason why these producers make them, not so they can sit in your cellar and you can forget about them. All right, so here we are with this incredible 2016 Barbaresco. We have a bit of a deeper color to it. This is still that beautiful ruby red. We got a little bit of brick around the edges. It's a little bit more intense of a color than what we saw with that Nebbiolo before. Obviously, this wine right here goes through 1 month in piccoli botti. Quindi these are not the traditional French barrique, French barrels that we have in our mind. They are a little bit bigger, but still they are not enormous. It doesn't say which passage it goes through, which kind of lends me to think that these are barrels that may have different passages in them. But at the same time, they could still be new because there is a little bit of spice. That'll be something interesting for us to eventually find out. This wine right here, as you can tell just from the nose, there is something very, very powerful about it. There's also an elegance to it as well. And we'll get into that word a little bit because there's been another word that's been attributed to Barbaresco over the years, which may or may not be the right way to actually talk about it. But getting back to this wine, on the nose, you get this beautiful ethereal moment coming out of the glass. And then you're just kind of wrapped up in these beautiful cherries, these spice notes, a touch of vanilla. We're getting into balsamic, that you can just begin to understand how all of these things are eventually going to evolve over time. Beautiful wine, extremely balanced. The tannins are definitely there, but they are softer. They are a little bit more supple. They're a little bit more enjoyable immediately. They're not grippy, but they're definitely present. And there's this beautiful note of licorice that's starting to come out as well. And still there, that cherry, the cherry of Nebbiolo and the violet that comes out is just absolutely fantastic. These are the calling cards. These are the trademarks of what is a Nebbiolo from the Piemonte. And again, just an absolutely brilliant, brilliant wine. Here, obviously, a lot of people go into, when we start talking about pairing and big red wines, oh, it's a steak. Oh, it's, you know, you have to use it with wild game or something like that. Yeah, that's true, you can. But I was talking to somebody who probably has drank, who will have drank more Barolo and Barbaresco than I ever will in my entire life, and times 10. And he told me, yeah, I just enjoy it. When I feel like drinking this wine, I'm gonna drink this wine and I'm gonna eat something with it. It doesn't always have to be so serious. As a one Heath Ledger would say, why so serious when we start talking about big name wines? Let's have a little fun with it. Let's experiment, let's enjoy. Again, this wine right here, 12 months, piccoli botti, 10 to 12 days of maturation with contact with the skin. And on top of that, we're talking about spontaneous fermentation, which is a beautiful thing because there's no added yeast. All the yeasts are what is naturally produced from the grapes itself. And this again, just goes on to create an even greater and more pronounced identity for this wine. Absolutely beautiful. Unfortunately, somebody has to drink it. Really, really just beautiful floral notes. Beautiful floral notes, and I love that about Barbaresco, and I love that about Nebbiolo. It gives it just a really beautiful earthy tone to it. Earthy, not in the sense of that damp undergrowth or that damp forest that sometimes we find in aged wines, but just something a little bit light and earthy that kind of lifts it up a little bit, and I find that absolutely beautiful about these wines. All right, we are going to get into this beautiful riserva, and beautiful also in terms of positioning. This lies right on this ridge that actually runs in contrast to the vineyards in these two wines. So in both the Langhe Nebbiolo and the Barbaresco, we can think that maybe we are running horizontal with the hill. Here, we are crossing over the hill. So the vineyards almost go vertical. And you have to think that that has to do with the wind and the way that the wind passes over these hills, and that gives it another touch of freshness. But again, this being a riserva, this automatically means that we're talking about 4 years of aging. And once again, the vineyards here are 60 plus years old. That is definitely going to give us a different sense of complexity when we're talking with the raw material, the product, the grape itself. So, my favorite time, Coravin time. It's never gonna get old. I'm sorry for everybody who may be tired of us using it, seeing it, talking about it, but if you do not have a Coravin and you are a serious wine taster or wine lover, I don't know what you're doing. This isn't just a cool way to enjoy a glass of wine with friends. This is a great way for you to preserve memories and really, really allow you to taste wines differently and properly without ever wasting a drop. You know, if I had 10 people around a table and I decided to bring this bottle of wine, I'm sure I wouldn't be using a Coravin. But the fact that I'm tasting wines maybe with 1 or 2 other people, I'm gonna use this because that allows me to replicate that experience with multiple people. And I think that's pretty cool. All right, again, relatively similar color to the first one, a deep garnet, a nice ruby. Yeah, this beautiful, beautiful garnet color with again, this kind of brick tone around the edges. Here, the fact that this spends more time in wood, you definitely sense this from the nose. That spice is just a little bit more accentuated, that little bit of vanilla, but really that licorice is really starting to come out even from the nose. And here for the wood, we are talking about French barrels. So we're talking about smaller barrels, and barrels are obviously really, really important because, and the size of them, because that talks about the amount of wine that can go inside and the actual amount of wood that it is exposed to. So when we used a smaller barrel, we have a less amount of liquid, more contact with the wood. When we use larger barrels, we can put in more wine inside and it has less contact with the actual wood. Another thing that we always talk about is the amount of passages. Wood that is fresh, wood that is of the first passage, that typically means you're gonna get more impact from that wood. If we get into the 10, 15, 20, that type of range, its impact is going to be quite minimal, and it becomes just a beautiful vessel really to kind of let the wine just hang out for a little while. Trying to let this open up just a tad, but this is beautiful. And again, you can tell there's a beautiful amount of freshness that once again is thanks to its acidity and the acidity that Nebbiolo has. And at the same time, we're getting into a softness. You can tell already from the nose how inviting this wine is. And to the east, and a little bit further south, we have San Rocco Senodelvio. Each one of these townships, because of the way that the soil composition is made up, there are areas that have more tighter tannins that need a little bit more time, and there are some that need less. Once again, Rio Sordo has been internationally known as one of the more, let's say, approachable Barbarescos, and I would even put this Riserva up there as well. Approachable in the sense that I know a lot of people who are a little bit adverse to extremely tannic wines, or maybe don't love extreme or really strong acidity and are kind of turned off by those things. And I think that these wines would definitely be wines that they would enjoy because they're just so well made, they're so well curated, and its end form after it spends time in wood and then again in the bottle creates something extremely, extremely unique. So unique that I'm done sharing it with you. No, I'm kidding. This has been another incredible adventure. Thank you so much to Cascina Bruciata. Thank you to the Abona family. Thank you for all of the amazing work that you've done in two of the most important winemaking areas in all of Italy and also the world. Carrying on a tradition of making excellent products is something to be very much admired. And hats off to you guys for everything that you're doing. And thank you for letting us talk about it, because these wines, in my opinion, speak for themselves. But if you give the space for Johnny to say something, Johnny will say something. So cheers to you guys. Cheers till next time. Johnny Vino signing out. It's a good day.